Okay, so we're back, and we stopped with this question here. Does the exercise of rule really and truly eliminate philosophy? So let's try to pick up that question and push it forward. So the presence of philosophy in the beautiful city, if you recall, Socrates called the city the beautiful city. First of all, there would always be a younger population of guardians receiving a philosophical education. Philosophy as the love and pursuit of wisdom would always be present in the city, even if the ruler himself is not involved in philosophizing full time. Second, okay, so there'd always be philosophy in the city. Second, at least some of the most advanced philosophers would have to be involved full time in the education of younger philosophers. They at least would be involved in philosophy full time. Okay, it looks like philosophy is making a comeback in this city. Might even be facilitated by this city. Might be more philosophers in this city than in a place like Athens. And by philosophers, I mean philosophers who are philosophizing, right? Not just done with their education and now negotiating contracts with the garbage collection company or something. Third, even the philosopher kings involved more fully in more quotidian practical affairs, particularly judging legal cases, would still be applying the conclusions of philosophy to particular cases for the sake of the good and justice. Justice would be a kind of aspect of the good, or part. The consideration and concrete application of philosophical truths would make up a bulk of their time. So I conclude that the difficulty, in fact, is not fatal. Okay? That distinguishes me from a certain school of thought about this, coming from Leo Strauss on the one hand and Stanley Rosen on the other. So being, becoming, and non-being. Okay, so now we're looking at real metaphysical distinctions here. Metaphysics has to do with the study of what is really real, or in a word, the nature of reality, okay, or if you like, reality itself. So Socrates argues that there is a kind of gradation of reality from what is fully real, that is being, down through what is less real, becoming, and reaching a kind of nadir with non-being. So let's look at this more closely. Being corresponds to what does not change, namely the principles that regulate what exists. These are what he calls the forms or ideas. A form is a pattern or paradigm that is common to many instances of a kind. So there are many, there are many seals, right? The aquatic animal, mammal, but there is only one form of the seal. Okay, so there's only one way to be a seal. Some of you are thinking, well, seals differ slightly from one another. Right, but those differences, you can just ignore those because they all conform to a general pattern. They all have the same flippers, the whiskers on their nose, so on and so forth, the tail, certain amount of body fat. Their skin's more or less the same. Their dental properties are more or less the same. They differ slightly, from subspecies to subspecies, and within subspecies, they differ slightly from seal to seal. You can see what I'm saying. There's still what it is to be a seal. There is no seal that looks like a giraffe floating in the water somewhere. A seal looks like a seal. Okay, you follow? So it is in virtue of this relation to the form, seal, that the many seals are our seals and belong to the same kind. So this is the one over the many. The one form over the many instances of the form. You're a human being, and your mom is a human being, and your cousin is a human being, and Kamala Harris is a human being. Okay? That's four of you. What's the same between you? The form human being. So that's the one form related to the four instances of human being that I just named. We can go on adding instances if you like. Don Lemon, the fellow on CNN, right? He got canned, didn't he? Tucker Carlson, the fellow on Fox News, he got canned too. Right, both those guys. So the seals themselves are definitely not invariant. They continuously change. Say they do not occupy a position in the domain of being as such, but not occupying the domain of being. So what's the idea there? The seals, they're always acquiring properties and losing properties. They gain a little weight, they lose a little weight, right? I don't know if a seal gets a suntan, but that they can perhaps change their darkness a little bit with respect to how much time they spend in the sun, so on and so forth. They're continuously changing. So they're not invariant, and they don't belong to the domain of being, which is the domain of invariance. Okay? Now, not occupying the domain of being as such does not imply that a thing does not exist at all. Clearly it exists. You're looking right at it, right? Rather, it allows for the possibility of a certain partial, here's the key term metaphysically, participation. I should have put that in bold. Participation in being as such, a kind of defective mode of being that occurs midway between being and non-being. This Plato calls becoming. Okay? So there's absolute non-being, there's that which does not exist at all. And some people claim you can't even think about such a thing. And they have a good reason for saying that because it has no properties, has no characteristics, there's nothing about it that you could fasten your mind on. And yet we think that we actually can, can't we? You know, there's being, and then you negate being as such, you end up with non-being. Okay, it's sort of a paradoxical thought, and somewhere in between being and non-being is becoming. Okay, so there are admittedly difficulties in getting a handle on what Plato is saying here, right? Surely things that become, change, they exist. So it would seem that they do belong to the domain of being. So to exist is not the same thing as to belong to the domain of being. There are different modes of existence. Do you follow? There are things which belong to the domain of being because they don't change at all. And then there are things that participate. They don't belong to it, but they participate in the domain of being because they exist in the mode of becoming. All right. So Socrates is firm that things that become do not belong to the domain of being. They do not belong because there is not the least trace of stability in them. That's an interesting observation. Think about that. I wonder if it's ever occurred to you that all the stuff that we see going on around us and what's happening in us and in our own bodies and our thoughts, there's no stability here at all. Everything's continuously in motion. Isn't that interesting? Nothing stays in one place. As I talk to you, there are cars driving out on the road in front of me. It kind of underscored or highlighted what I was saying. There's just things here are just moving continuously. But the motion is not chaotic motion. There's a kind of order to it, right? And then the sciences grab hold of that, and um, physics and chemistry and biology and geology and the other sciences try to give us some kind of account of how things do change in an orderly way in accordance with laws, right? So if we allow ourselves to look outside of the Republic for a second, third bullet point here, in the Phaedo, it's another dialogue. I could have taught that one, but the Republic's really the best introduction. In the Phaedo, Socrates gets the idea, or this idea across by stating that each thing that becomes is not the same as itself. In Greek, ou auton, if you care. Ou means not, auton means the same. This formulation is more of a puzzle than a solution, but it is a puzzle that points to a reality that is itself enigmatic. So look what he's saying there, right? You are yourself and you're different from some other person. But in a way, we can almost say that you're different from yourself because you're changing from moment to moment. And whatever you were 3 seconds ago when I said that, that's gone, and now you are what you are at the moment, right? But to say that you're different from yourself is not satisfying because you're not different from yourself in the way that you're different from your house or apartment building. Okay? There's a less intensive degree of difference going on with respect to you moment to moment that obtains between you and a house or a car, okay, or something else. So rather than say that you're different from yourself, let's just say that you're not the same as yourself. Find some degree in between. You're ou auton. So some things are simply the same as themselves. For example, the form of the human being or the form of the seal. There also is blank differences, is flat-on differences. The form of the seal is as flat out different from the form of the human being. Okay? And you are, in a sense, flat out different from your car or from somebody's car. Okay? But there's something in between these two things, and that is being non-identical. and you yourself are non-identical with respect to one time phase taken in relation to another time phase. Make any sense? Okay, so I mean, this is the beginning of philosophy here, and we've seen already that it's even the beginning is incredibly sophisticated, and this is the attempt on the part, really, of the greatest philosopher ever. I mean, I think philosophers surpass Plato as far as actually giving you answers to questions, but you really can't say anyone has surpassed Plato as a philosopher in that he kind of defined the entire field of philosophy for us, and we've been trying to answer his questions ever since he really, got the whole thing going. I know there were these pre-Socratic philosophers and Socrates, but it was Plato who wrote all this stuff down so that people could then, take the books and read them and then have discussions with one another. And that's how it really all got kicked off as far as a large civilizational and global, eventually global endeavor. Right? That's what we have today. All right. So the formulation of non-identity or not being the same is more of a puzzle than a solution, but it is a puzzle that points to a reality that is itself enigmatic. For if time is continuous, by the way, modern physics now denies this, put that to one side. If time is continuous, then each time segment is a continuum that is infinitely divisible. And modern physics might have that wrong, by the way, because modern physics, they have their own problems. They have quantum mechanics on the one hand, and Einsteinian relativity theory on the other. They have 1,001 different ways of proposing unification. All of them have defects. And the Einsteinian theory makes predictions which are not borne out by observation, so they have to make up this thing called dark matter, which is outside of the table of elements. It's just kind of a theory state. It has no properties whatsoever. It just means that they don't have to throw out their theory. Okay, they have their own problems, and so their idea that time is made of discrete quanta of time, that might be false. So time might actually be continuous, and that's how we experience it, actually. And each time segment, therefore, mathematically considered, would be indefinitely divisible. So take your pen and write down a line on a piece of paper right now. Cut that line in half. Okay, put a line perpendicular to that line. Cut it in half. Now cut that half in half. Now cut the next half in half. Okay, so when you cut the whole thing in half, you had two segments. When you cut half in half, you had three segments. Two of them were equal to one another, and one was equal to the sum of the two that you cut in half. Cut another one in half, right? Okay, now you have two of the smallest segments relative to the others. Cut a further one in half. You follow me? You can keep cutting that thing in half until it's impossible for you to do because your pen is too thick. And after a while, we can't see how to go on dividing a line or a time segment. We couldn't experience that division going on forever. But that's just because of a limitation of our sensory apparatus. We can imagine a transhuman being who has, endowed with the excuse me, the computer technology necessary to go on dividing that indefinitely, right? And he keeps dividing time until he gets to not only nanoseconds. A nanosecond, what would that be? 1/1000th of a second, but picoseconds. What's a picosecond? One hundred billionth or one trillionth? Look it up. I can't remember. It keeps dividing. So we can imagine that in fact time is divisible, and it could just be divided forever. All right. So divide it into as many segments as one pleases, and one will have come no closer to a point that is stable. For each segment itself is infinitely divisible. There's a problem there in the PowerPoint. One will have come no closer, not too closer, no closer to a point that is stable. Okay, you follow? He's keep dividing forever. Keep dividing forever. Okay. Temporal being is instability itself. Bite down on that and think about that. It's a paradox. Temporal being is instability itself. It is not non-being. Non-being would be the complete voiding out of all characteristics and properties. Now, the only philosopher I know who's actually confronted the problem of non-being, stared squarely in the face and tried to erect a philosophical system that solves the problem of non-being, is really Heidegger, Heidegger. And he is a 20th century philosopher. He was born in the 19th century, but he was a little kid, and he only started really producing philosophical works in the 20th century. And he's effectively the greatest philosopher of the 20th century, just for having chosen to face the problem of non-being. He was the first person really to do that. Okay. So temporal being is instability itself, tending towards non-being. In each individual case, non-being is eventually reached, but the whole cosmos remains in existence. So what do I mean by that? Eventually, individuals are destroyed. I'm living in this house here. This house is not going to last forever. I mean, maybe somebody will want to preserve this thing. Might be here 1,000 years from now, right? But 100,000 years from now, I think not. I think not, right? It's going to be knocked down sooner or later. Okay. And if you believe, if you subscribe to atheistic naturalism, you think the sun will expand eventually and burn up my house. If you subscribe to theistic supernaturalism, you think that God is going to more or less abolish this cosmos as it is, or you might think that. Depends how you read the scripture. And he'll make a new heaven and a new earth, right? Okay. That's why you find in Christian communities, there aren't too many people in Christian communities who are sort of, you can find them talking about stewardship and taking care of nature, but you don't find like strict environmentalists who sometimes, pardon me for saying it, sometimes converge on nature worship. The back of a lot of these Christian parishes and congregations are thinking, well, this is all scheduled for annihilation anyway. Let's take care of it while we're here, but let's not assign it more significance than it has. Other folks have a different view. They assign a great deal of significance to nature. So we have a very diverse community in the United States of America. And let's argue things out with civility. So here we go. The good and the divided line. In order to schematize and fill out his thought yet further, Socrates offers an analogy for understanding the good and a second analogy for understanding the various levels of totality and their corresponding levels of cognition. Okay? So we proceed directly to the good. So I sort of mentioned the good before. Now let's talk about it. Number one, it is beyond being. I didn't put the Greek there. Ekeno to ontos. Ekeno, you want to know that? Ekeinou space Tou space ontos. Okay? Ekeno to beyond being. He means limited, definite, unitary being. So when you're saying you're beyond being, some of you are thinking, okay, if you're beyond being, you are at non-being, right? So being and non-being seem to coalesce in some way. No, that's not what Plato is saying here. There is a philosopher, not a philosopher, a kind of mystic, a mystical theologian who called himself Dionysius. He wasn't. He was naming himself after the disciple of Saint Paul. I believe the actual Dionysius is Saint Dionysius, and in English we call him Dennis. Okay, but it wasn't actually Dennis. It was probably a Syrian monk of the 5th century, maybe a contemporary of Proclus, the Neoplatonist, and he does draw that inference. He says that God is ultimately beyond being and therefore, in a way, non-being. Not in the sense of not existing, but being beyond anything that we can think of as being. Yeah, so if you're interested in that kind of thing, I have the book right here, but I used to lecture on this stuff. I used to teach I am teaching a PC, but I used to teach in their Western Civ program, and they have you study that kind of stuff there. So, fascinating material. Pseudo Dionysius. Just look him up on Amazon. You'll see a couple of his books there. They think they collect everything that he wrote and translated it in classics of Western spirituality. Okay? So the good is beyond being. Number two is the cause of the intelligibility of the beings. I mean, if anything exhibits any kind of order, like geometrical figures or animal species, basically anything in biological nature, chemical nature, physical nature, and in the realm of mathematics, the good is the cause of its intelligibility. Okay? But it goes beyond that. It's the cause of the very being of their beings. Okay. So these things wouldn't be at all if the good did not cause their being. Now, to be for these beings, this is straight away to be something definite. Okay? For the ancient Greeks, for Plato and Aristotle particularly, to be is to be definite, to be something definite. There's no such thing as like an abstract property of existence which is different from that of being. Okay. At least that's a very common thesis, and I'm happy to see it challenged. But for my money, I've gotten more mileage out of the thesis that for Aristotle and for Plato, to be is to be something definite. So the good is the cause of the very being in the sense of the definiteness. We can't help but say existence, so I'll say it. The definiteness and the existence of the forms that we'll get to, okay? We've already talked about the form of humanity and the form of the seal. Of course, there's a form of a koala bear and a form of a giraffe and so on and so forth. My old advisor used to talk about the giraffe, it was his favorite. And these are all, as it were, emanations or radiations from the good. I have to use the Neoplatonic vocabulary in order to begin to even grope at understanding what Plato's talking about. So by the beings, he means the forms, okay? The forms. I just gave you some examples. The good itself is not reducible to being one form amongst forms. The good transcends all the forms, right? But it makes the forms intelligible. Now, if you're getting dizzy, guys, this is very heady metaphysics here. This is, of course, but I got to bring you there sooner or later, right? And now we're doing like serious metaphysics. So the good makes the forms intelligible. These are the true objects of philosophical definition. Okay, now go back to book 1, trying to define justice. We're trying to define the form of justice in human language by somehow discerning through dialectical method what its structure has to be. And how do you do that? You propose a series of alternatives. Those that lead you to contradiction, you reject. If there's one that stands up, that's the one. That's what it is. Okay, that's a philosophical method. Okay, so it makes the forms intelligible. The good makes the forms intelligible in a manner comparable to how the sun makes sensible beings visible, and that's a comparison in the text, of course. And just as the sun gives life to things that become, the good gives being to things that are. So the good is the cause of the intelligibility and being of the forms. It answers the question, why are there forms? Well, there are forms because their existence, order, and interrelation are good. Goodness, not neutral scientific factuality, is the very cause of the existence of anything else. So why? So that I said that all really, really quickly. Here's the answer. I mean, why are there forms at all? The forms are good. That's why. That the good causes them to be because they're good. If they weren't good, if there were nothing good other than the good would exist by itself, and that would be the end of it. But it is good that there be something other than the good, and that's the forms. You follow? And then we can infer the realm of becoming exists because of the good as well, because it is good. You recall this idea that the God is the cause of all things good and nothing evil. Remember that? I'm kind of groping towards Jewish, Christian, and Muslim theology. So goodness, not neutral scientific factuality, is the very cause of the existence of anything else. Now, even in science, guys, we like facts over non-facts. Even in science, we think of facts as good. So it's kind of hard to identify any way of looking at the world which is strictly speaking value neutral. In science, we like true theories. We like genuine facts and not falsehoods and not fictions, right? So note that he does not say that the good causes becoming. He didn't say it, right? And I said it. He didn't say it. Becoming seems to be based on some other principle, or else on nothing at all. All right. Here's what I'm going to suggest. Okay. There's something about becoming which is good, and the good contributes that which is good in becoming. You follow me? But not everything in becoming is good. There's some other ingredient in becoming that's not good, and some other principle will contribute the non-good or the evil element in becoming. You follow? So once you turn to the Timaeus, another dialogue, for a discussion of the principles of the universe and the domain of becoming. Very good. The divided line is organized into 4 levels. That is, one rises from the lowest to the highest. the entities in question present themselves with greater degrees of clarity, and so are more precisely cognized. Okay, so the divided line, you recall from the text, that's a hierarchy of clarity, but it's a clarity that exists in being itself. And our minds will become more or less clear to the degree that we succeed in rising to a higher level of the divided line. Here we go. Here it is. At the very bottom, we'll start at the bottom. The bottom, we have images. Okay, so here we have visible images such as paintings and sculptures. And this is very important to emphasize, audible images like words and statements. And that's the stuff that Thrasymachus uses and the rhetoricians use to throw fairy dust in people's eyes, keep them, as it were, hypnotized and captivated by their sort of replacement for reality. In Book 7, we get to a nice discussion of that. So the mode of cognition here is eikasia, imagination, right? So they play on the imagination and seduce and even hypnotize one, captivate one, the way that Hollywood does, right? We're kind of hypnotized by their films. People get hypnotized by big celebrity, and big celebrity is no different from you or me. I mean, they're just people, but they put them on a big screen, surround sound, so on and so forth. They airbrush them, of course. Okay, they put them in very expensive clothing. It takes them 4 hours to do that hairdo. You see what I'm saying, right? So they make them into a product effectively, and the product becomes a kind of cynosure. A cynosure, that's something people kind of focus on obsessively. A kind of object of fascination, a kind of object of absorption, infatuation, right? So that's what's going on down at that basic level. And then the second level is the level of actual things itself. Now notice, it's interesting thinking about Hollywood because they take things like human beings. I don't mean a human being as a mere thing, but they're like an entity, like a human being, and turn that human being into an image. Very interesting with technology. And it's the image which seduces and infatuates and dazzles and hypnotizes. Okay. So anyway, things or entities maybe is a better word. Well, the Greek is to pragma, and typically we translate that things. Okay. These also inhabit the realm of becoming. And here, of course, we have particular humans. We have trees, rocks, mountains, dolphins, of course, right, and the like. And this corresponds to the level of aesthesis. Now we have a power of sensation, and the power of sensation, like animal sensation, succeeds to a degree in putting us into contact with reality. Not the whole thing. Like if you see a brown bear coming at you, you're going to see him under a certain aspect. You won't see the brown bear from every point of view all at once. You follow me? Aesthesis gives us a partial access to a profile of a thing, but not to the thing as such. Do you get it? Okay. Very good. And then images take profiles and present them as if they themselves were things. That's interesting. So the arts, generally speaking, painting and sculpture, but also rhetoric, they take the profiles of things, okay, and then they manipulate those so as to play your chords, manipulate your emotions and the like. Okay, so let's leave becoming behind, move up to the third level. There we have the mathematicals. And here we've departed the realm of becoming into being. Because in the realm of mathematics, things don't change, folks. Okay? 2 plus 2 equals 4. That's the end of it. Very nice. Okay? The circumference of a circle divided by the diameter is pi, 3.14, and so on. And there's no changing that, so long as we're talking about Euclidean space. Okay? And there are other kinds of space. There's spaces with a positive curvature and a negative curvature, and the properties change if you do that. So the mathematicals refer to numbers and figures. Now, nowadays, we've expanded that to include logical relations, okay? Like conjunction and disjunction and implication and things of that sort. Negation, of course. And we also understand there to be variables even statement variables is interesting. Statement variables, and depending upon your philosophy, actual statements in the realm of the mathematicals. That becomes very controversial at that point. But there's a general sort of consensus that minimally the basic inventory of logical entities, as it were, are present in the realm of the mathematicals. Now, some people say that we make that realm of the mathematicals up, right? Other persons say, no, we access the realm of the mathematicals, but it's not possible to make such a thing up. It's not even possible for such a thing not to exist. They all exist with a kind of inner necessity, right? They're pretty good arguments to that effect, too. So the mathematicals include numbers, figures. Today we say logical relations, and this corresponds to what we call dianoia, discursive reason, that faculty of the mind by which we reason things out one step at a time, saying one thing after another, like Socrates and Thrasymachus did in Book 1, and like they've been doing through the whole Republic, okay? That's dianoia. But there's something above even the mathematicals, that's the forms. And there again, we have man itself, tree itself, dolphin itself, and so on. Now, if you turn to a dialogue like the Sophist, you find there are even higher forms, like identity, difference, unity, becoming. All right, very good. Now, can we just graft the Sophist directly onto the Republic? I'd hesitate before doing that, but what it does is it raises a question concerning a higher level of forms, and we'd have to think that out. We don't have time to do that here. I simply have to raise the question for you so you can pursue this on your own, because there's plenty of material online, and you can type into YouTube Plato, the Sophist, Sophist, and you'll get a bunch of professors talking about the Sophist. You can type the Sophist in PDF, and you can then just read the darn thing. Okay. I always get a student who's really fired up about this stuff, so this is why I throw those little tidbits out there. Anyway, so the forms are intellected by nous. Not with a form, you grasp it all at once in an instant. Okay. Now the form has an inner structure, but you grasp its inner parts and their relationship to one another instantaneously. Poof, boom, done. Just got it. Get that? It's like hearing a chord. Do, mi, so, right? That's an arpeggio, not a chord. I can't sing a chord. But if you imagine all three of those notes in the arpeggio together, right? You hear them all. Experience of a form would be like that. You'd be like grasping the harmony of the parts of the form, fusing with one another so as to produce one reality. Okay. So 3. Okay. Do, mi, so, ti, re. Okay, so yeah, that's 5 right there, right? That's music. I hadn't thought about that. It literally had never occurred to me to compare musical harmony with Plato's theories of forms, but now I'm thinking that there's something to it. So I'll pursue that a bit. Now, it would be an analogy, not a strict identity, but analogies can be very helpful, as we've seen. So the forms and the mathematicals, these belong to the realm of being, but all of this is subordinated to the good itself, which is beyond being, the cause of the intelligibility of the forms, and therefore of the mathematicals and everything else, to the degree each thing is intelligible, and it's the cause of the very being of these things, okay? So the good begins to look like God, but he doesn't ascribe intellect to the good. So he's not talking about God in the Jewish, Christian, and Muslim traditions. All right? See that? So what we're encountering here is not theistic supernaturalism. What we're encountering here are the foundations of atheistic supernaturalism. There's something above nature, which is the cause, in some way or another, of this natural universe, and it seems to have a dual set of causes, the good itself and something else. And the good itself is not a person. Okay, so it's not a God in the way that we would mean a God. It is simply this, if you like, an original point of emanation from which all being emerges. Okay, at least that aspect of being which is good. And that's it. Okay, folks, so hope that does you. And I'll try to post another one for Tuesday on Book 7. Be well.